And I actually spent time watching my predecessors who stood here before me and the messages they've given to their students, or the students that we're talking to. And all I can say, these are some phenomenal, amazing people that gave some great advice. And what became clear is that each one of them had a specific trait that stood out, a trait that gave them strength, whether it was courage that they discussed or adaptability. Each one was unique. So then I started thinking about my life and my career. And one trait has been pervasive throughout my life, and that is grit. Again, grit, G-R-I-T. What is grit? I like the definition posted by Angela Lee Duckworth, an American psychologist. She defines grit as having the passion and perseverance to attain long-term goals, having the stamina day in and day out for years to work hard to make your dreams a reality. It's living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. Now, Ms. Duckworth has spent her career trying to understand, why do some people succeed? Why do others fail? She has conducted studies on students at West Point. She has looked at competitors in the National Spelling Bee, sales teams at Fortune 500 companies. And what her studies have shown is that there's one characteristic, and I quote, that has been a significant predictor of success. Again, significant predictor of success. And it wasn't their IQ, it wasn't their talent, it wasn't their health, it wasn't their good looks, for you good-looking people out there, I'm sorry. It was, you guessed it, grit. Now, she wasn't saying that those other qualities had no impact in their success. Of course they did. But she was saying, all else being equal, if you have talent plus grit versus just talent alone, the person with the grit component had a higher chance of succeeding, is what she was saying. In fact, her studies showed that some talented people, did not thrive because they failed to follow through. So now that you have some idea of what grit is and how it could potentially impact your career, you might be wondering, how can you nurture it? How can you build it? And you can build it like a muscle. But before I do get to that point, allow me a few minutes to tell you a little bit about who I am and where I've come from and how grit has played a huge part of my life. So I was born in Donna, Texas. For any of you who are Texas, that's a town down in South Texas, down the valley, down the border. I'm one of 6 kids, and my parents immigrated from Mexico back in the 60s. And when they got here, my dad immediately went into construction. My mom opened a bakery out of her kitchen. And the reason my dad did construction was because he didn't have too many options. You see, he dropped out of school when he was 8. Not 8th grade, when he was 8 years old. See, he preferred to tend cows and sheep and cattle and ranches in Mexico. And the work that he did was backbreaking. I know, because I did every summer and I hated it. It motivated me to study, trust me. And he was never home. He was gone by 6 a.m. and wasn't home until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I'm talking 6 days a week, sometimes 7. And his hands were constantly burned. And the reason is because he worked with cement. And those of you who know anything about cement, it has an exothermic reaction. It burns. It releases heat. And decades of working, as you saw his hands, they were just like this huge paws, callousy. And despite the fact that his job took a toll on his body, he still kept going. But why? And I asked him. He said, it's because I want a better life for my kids, and my job isn't done yet. He wanted to make sure we all got educated, and we did. 6 of us, we all got our college degrees, and some of us received our advanced degrees as well. And I want a little side note. I think it's kind of ironic, well, it is ironic, that a man who dropped out when he was in 3rd grade, essentially, made it such a huge commitment to ensure that his kids got educated. Another example of my dad's grittiness was his willingness to help out other people, even if it meant paying a price for it. As I mentioned, working with concrete, it's tough work. It's not the kind of job that most people want to jump in. It's the kind of work that most people who take it have a genuine need. And most of the time, my dad's workers were immigrants, most of the time undocumented. And I still remember vividly, we were working at a job site north of Harlingen, Texas, in the middle of the summer when INS, the predecessor of ICE, showed up in those distinct pale green trucks. And I won't forget, the doors open and 2 officers step out. They asked us all to line up and ask for identification. And sure enough, we knew it. Two of those gentlemen did not have identification, so they shipped them off. They got deported. You know, my dad knew that working with undocumented immigrants was risky, and the INS told him, you keep doing this, we're going to fine you. We're going to bury you with fines. And fine him they did to the tunes of tens of thousands of dollars. Now, back in the day, it was a lot of money. It's a lot of money today, but for someone who did not make much money, that was a ton. But his job wasn't done yet. He kept going. He continued to help those in need. Now, I'm giving some examples of my father's grittiness, but if there's one person in my life that embodies grit, it's my mother. She was born in Mexico, and at the age of 7, her mom left her in Mexico to be raised by her grandmother and her aunts. And it all worked out fine until her grandmother passed away, and at that point, she was left at the mercy of her aunts, who didn't like her. They treated her terribly. She suffered a lot at an early age. And I asked her one time, how did you survive? And she goes, when I was in that crucible, I could either wilt or thrive. And because I had a dream of living the American life, living the American dream, I was going to thrive because I wasn't there yet. I'll give you one other example that's more personal to me. Growing up, my parents worked hard to provide. But sometimes times were tough financially, and we lived off food stamps. Now, unlike today where a food stamp it's kind of like a debit card, right? And I think it's great because it provides dignity to the people that are using it. Back in the day, it was coupons. It was little booklets. So everyone knew you were on food stamps. And invariably, I was the one that was picked to get off the car, go to H-E-B, go pick up a pack of bread or, some ham or whatever. And invariably, I would run into classmates who would invariably make fun of me. It stung. It hurt. But I kept telling myself, it won't always be like that. And one day, I'll be in stronger financial footing. I'm just not there yet. Now, I've just given you a few examples of how grit has played a huge role during my formative years. And you may have noticed that I keep stressing the word yet. And there's a reason for that, because it dovetails into my next point, which is how do you develop grit? Well, there's 2 steps in my book. One is you embrace this mentality called growth mindset. This term was coined by Carol Dweck, a Stanford psychologist who has spent her life understanding this idea of a growth mindset. And a growth mindset, essentially, it gives you hope that your journey isn't over, that with effort, it can improve, whether it's personal or whether it's professional. And the key phrase there is not yet. Carol Dweck noted that a high school in Chicago, when students failed a class, they didn't get an F, they didn't get a D. On the report card, they got not yet. Now think about that for 1 second. If you failed a class and you received not yet, what does that tell you? And what she noted was those kids felt, my future isn't over. I still have a chance. There's hope for me. She performed a study on 10-year-old kids where she gave them a hard math exam where she knew they were going to miss most of the problems. And the results were astounding because there was 2 groups of kids essentially that came out of the study. The first group of kids said, wow, that was a hard test. That was challenging. Can't wait to learn more about how to solve these problems down the road. And what she noted was this mindset, these students did not view failure as a permanent state. They knew that they could improve upon their performance with effort, with a little bit of hard work. Now you compare it to the other group of kids who were just devastated. You see, their intellect had been tested and had been destroyed by this exam. And they admitted that they were more likely to cheat on the next exam because of what's called a closed mindset mentality. Instead of open, it's closed. If you have a closed mindset mentality, you're more likely to run away from difficulties and challenges. So the key here is I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have an open mindset and rely on this notion of not yet. So how can it apply to y'all's careers, especially, whether you're whether you're a professional, been working for years, or just a student, it's something you can always apply in your life. But for the students about to start their career, how can this apply to you? Well, let's assume that you're told that you're writing skills, your brief writing skills are not up to ready for prime time. You should, my advice is to say thank you for that feedback and turn around and say, perhaps I'm not a great writer. Yes. Your oral advocacy skills are not up to par, says another partner. Thank you for the feedback. Perhaps I'm not the best orator. Yet. Your deposition skills, as I heard one partner tell another associate, they frankly just suck. Kind of brutal. But still, keep your head up high. Thank you for the feedback. My depo skills are not where they need to be. Yet. But it's not just about saying, not yet or yet. You gotta take action, which brings me to my second point. Invest in yourself. When I first went in-house, I wasn't ready. I was not an amazing in-house counsel. I told myself, not yet. Because I recognized that my communication skills, my ability to work with different teams, my ability to see the business problems and find solutions weren't fully refined. So what did I do? I hired an executive coach. And I've been working with her for the past 8 years, consistently. And through this effort, I've improved my ability to work with different teams. I've improved my ability to communicate. And in fact, throughout my career, I've been asked to take tasks that I did not have a lot of experience in. For example, they said, hey, Garcia, we want you to take over the HR department. The first place that I took a job as in-house counsel. And I said, great, thank you for the confidence. And I turned around like, don't know much about HR yet. So what did I do? I got certified. I took classes. I spoke to my contemporaries in different organizations, asking what the best practices were. I mean, I put the work in, the homework. You got to do that. But it first starts with a mentality. I was asked to lead a compliance team. Don't know much about compliance yet. And you see the cadence here. And so coming back to my example, when you find yourself in a tough situation, when someone criticizes your writing skills or your ability to argue cases or argue before a judge, take it in full stride. Yes, it's gonna sting, it's gonna hurt. Lick your wounds, but and tell yourself, I'm not there yet, but put the effort to get there. Most of you who are here already have grit already, no doubt. And maybe you recognize it, maybe you don't. Maybe you did before this. All I can say is keep nurturing it, keep working at it. And since my time is almost up here, I wanna end with one of my favorite quotes that ties in nicely with this notion of grit. It is a quote by one of my favorite authors in the world, Theodore Roosevelt. And notwithstanding the name of the title of this quote, it applies to everyone. It's called The Man in the Arena. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or how the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who falls short again and again because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself on a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls that neither know victory nor defeat. Thank you.